Lemon don't waste any money on fancy packaging. You'll get your stabiliser in a simple sealed plastic bag. When you're cutting the bag to remove the stabiliser, be careful that you don't cut the antenna on the twin antenna version. The ends are almost transparent and very hard to see inside the bag. When you have them out, you'll find you have three components: a bind plug, a piece of double-sided sticky tape to mount it with, and the stabiliser itself. You may find that one or both of the antenna on the twin antenna version is slightly kinked at the joint like this. You can straighten it very gently by pulling it between your fingers, but be very careful not to break it. If you turn the case over, you'll see that it's held together at one end by two small screws, and at the other there are two plastic pins which fit into tight holes on the other side of the case. This is important because if you have the stabiliser held in by Velcro and try and pull the stabiliser out by the case, it's possible to separate it because the small screws pull out of the plastic. It's perfectly adequate for normal use, but just take care when removing it if it's held in by Velcro or by double-sided tape. I'm going to put the Stabiliser Plus in a Hobby King Tough Trainer. This is a small 900mm wingspan foam model built of EPP foam. It's probably fairly typical of the sort of model some beginners would have. It's a conventional model with elevator and rudder control. Has two separate aileron servos, but it comes with a Y lead, so it can be used with a 4-channel transmitter with the ailerons connected together. I'm going to set it up with separate aileron servos and use all 5 channels on the receiver for flight controls. The first step is to remove one side of the backing from the double-sided sticky foam tape that Lemon supply. This is a good quality tape and will provide adequate vibration isolation and yet keep the stabiliser firmly attached to the plane. Attach the foam tape to the back of the stabiliser, put it in the centre and press it firmly down once it's in place to make sure it's securely attached to the case. It's easiest to do the initial setup on the bench. The first thing is to set dip switches 4, 5 and 6. Since this is a conventional model and I'm using 2 aileron servos, I set all 3 switches to the on position. You'll note that I have a bind plug in and power applied on the throttle input. However, the battery is not yet connected and the receiver is not turned on when I set these switches. I'm just going to run through a normal bind operation, then we'll come back and we'll look at it in detail. So this is just to show you what it looks like. When you apply power, the receiver goes into bind mode, waiting for the transmitter. When it sees a signal, it binds. There it goes. And then it goes through a little initialization routine. And finally, when the 2 right-hand LEDs are both on, the stabilizer is active. It's actually in the off mode when they're both lit. Let's have a look at that again. Initially there is no power applied, no LEDs are on. When I turn the power on, the LEDs start flashing and the receiver goes into bind mode. I want you to keep an eye on this green LED here at the end of the bind procedure. When the transmitter transmits its bind protocol, the receiver goes into bind mode, the green LED flashes 4 times and then the ones on the left start flashing. The blue and green flashing LEDs indicate that the stabilizer is in its initialization phase, and when that finishes, the green and red LEDs at the right hand side come on. If you flip the gear switch, then the LEDs start alternating and this indicates the stabilizer is in auto level mode. So solid LEDs, stabilizer off, alternating LEDs, auto level mode. If you have a 3-position switch on the gear channel, the green LED will go solid in the center position, indicating that the stabilizer is in gyro mode. So to repeat that, alternating LEDs, auto level mode, solid green LED, gyro mode, both LEDs solid, the stabilizer is off. Obviously, if you don't have a 3-position switch, you will not get gyro mode. If you get 4 red flashes instead of 4 green flashes at the end of binding, this is not an issue. It just means the internal calibration of the stabilizer has not taken place, but it is extremely stable over time and this is not a problem in practice. The stabiliser can now be mounted in the plane and will perform perfectly adequately and do quite good auto levelling without any other adjustments. I've cheated a bit and used a top pin one here because it's easier to plug the servos in and out, but it's identical to the one I showed before. In this place, switches 1, 2 and 3 are all off, default as delivered, and switches 4, 5 and 6 are on because I have a conventional wing and tail and 2 individual aileron servos. The wing in this model is very typical. It has 2 servos with 2 individual leads leading into the fuselage, and they can be plugged separately into the receiver. If you use a Y lead, then both servos are connected into the Y lead and there is only a single connection to go into the receiver, and one channel drives both aileron servos. You need to tell the transmitter what kind of wing you have. In the wing type menu on the transmitter, you would choose a normal wing for a wing of this type which has 2 servos connected to a Y lead. If you're using a wing with 2 separate aileron servos and 2 connectors, then you plug one into the aileron output on the stabiliser and the other one into the auxiliary 1 output. You need to tell the transmitter in the wing type menu that you either have dual ailerons or want to use flaperons, and you have to set dip switch 6 on the stabiliser to the on position. Setup is now almost complete. The stabiliser will actually work perfectly adequately with this calibration that we've just done and will keep quite good auto level in the model. Here it is installed. I've cheated a bit and used a top pin version so it's easy to put the plugs in and out, but I have an elevator and rudder servo connected, I have the throttle connected, I have the dip switches 4, 5 and 6 set to on, and switches 1, 2 and 3 are still off in the default as delivered position. This will work fine if the stabiliser is mounted flat in a horizontal position in the model. However, if it is mounted vertically or upside down, or you want to adjust the model level flying position more precisely, then there's another stage you can go through that involves a toggling gesture. Toggling involves moving the channel 5 control switch rapidly back and forth at least 6 times in a 2-second period. If it's a 3 position switch, then you should only have to move it 3 times from one end to the other, but in fact more does not hurt. This has to happen immediately after the blue and green LEDs start flashing. If you do a toggle gesture, then you need to place the model in the level flight position. This particular model flies at about 2 or 3 degrees up angle. If you look at the brick course behind the model with the yellow lines on it, that's the level position, and you can see that the centre line of the fuselage is pointing slightly upwards. What we're doing when we send a toggle gesture from the transmitter to the stabiliser is that we're telling the stabiliser this is the attitude the model should adopt when I switch to auto level mode. Let's see what that looks like. I've deliberately filmed this in rather dim light so you can see the LEDs. The transmitter's on, the receiver is bound. As soon as the power is applied, the receiver comes on, the blue and green LEDs start flashing, and then you do a toggle. A red LED indicates toggling's in progress. When it's completed and the blue and green LEDs go out, the stabiliser is now in operating mode. At the moment it's off with both LEDs solid. Now it's in auto level mode as the LEDs alternate. And now it's in gyro mode with one solid green LED. Off, auto level, gyro mode, auto level, off. The stabiliser is now ready for flight except for one very important thing. Switches 1 and 2 and 3 can only be set once the stabiliser is in the model and you're able to wave it around in the air and see how the surfaces react. It is absolutely critical that those switches be set correctly so that the stabiliser operates in the correct direction. That is, if it drops a wing, it puts that aileron down to lift it up again, or if the nose dips, the elevator goes up to raise the nose. The essential instructions have a clear section on how to check this and how to do it, and it's absolutely critical you do not leave the ground without making sure the stabiliser is operating in the correct direction.